James Lipton's Inside, Chapter 6, page 138. Of course I was indulging in the common practice of providing ex post facto reasons to shore up a decision already taken. Regine had me with Jim. Now there was the matter of accreditation. In the formalized hierarchy of the milieu, one didn't simply declare oneself a mec. Even here, rank had its privileges and presumption its penalties. A soi-disant mec would evoke the enmity of the real articles. Not advisable. When I arrived at the station the next night, Regine was waiting for me at a center table surrounded by filles, all of them beaming at me over an open bottle of champagne. Permission had been granted, and with it a reprieve. America faded into an indistinct future. I was now working as a member of the community, just like the Parisians I saw leaving for work in the morning and returning each evening with baguettes of bread under their arms. For a person who had grown up convinced that he didn't quite belong in the world in which he found himself, I was completely at home in this peculiar circumstance. To this day, from the moment I arrive in Paris, I feel instantly and thoroughly at home. My life took on a comfortable regularity. It had structure and a daily routine. In a sense, it was more conventional and bourgeois than any life I'd ever known, though I suspect my father would have approved of this conventionality. I even had an office of sorts in the Place de l'Opéra, on the sidewalk outside the American Express office next to the Café de la Paix, where I could count on finding a large congregation of tourists, most of them American, eager to sample the fabled delights of Paris. The sidewalk echoed with the shouts of jostling guides offering expert personnel tours to Notre Dame and the Sainte-Chapelle and the Eiffel Tower. I offered a different delight, in a quieter, more discreet voice, and the tourists, who in their secret heart of hearts had come to Paris hoping that an opportunity like this would present itself, were, to put it mildly, receptive. Regine and I did a thriving business. The tourists were understandably nervous about entering Paris's most notorious quarter, so like all the other guides, I offered personal service. My clients would meet me at the appointed hour, and I would take them to Rue Pigalle for what was called in the profession a cinéma coutron, a dirty movie, but was, of course, a live and lively exhibition. Because Regine insisted I have special privileges at the establishment, I was allowed to bring my clients, almost all of them nervous, excited young middle-class couples from Middle America, into the station, where they sat gingerly in the booth with me, picking out the fee to team with Regine upstairs. I offered them a full bill of fare, 2 women or a man and a woman. A man and a woman was much more costly than 2 women, the law of supply and demand, not to mention the law of diminishing returns. The woman could perform countless times each day, the men only 2 or 3. The men were summoned from a bar at the corner where they waited, drinking Pernod, smoking Gauloises, and reading sports magazines, for a summons to one of the street's lineup of hotels. Once my clients had made their choices, we mounted the stairs to one of the rooms, each of which featured ornately flocked crimson wallpaper, a large rumpled bed with a heavy carved headboard, a couch, and a couple of chairs covered in red velvet, and, behind a curtain, a bidet. In retrospect, viewing the scene through the eyes of my young clients from Baltimore or Memphis or Des Moines, those rooms must have looked like the eighth circle of Dante's Inferno, which at least placed me in the respectable company of Dante's guide Virgil, or Paradise. As the client's personal guide, I was obliged to stay with them. This was an essential ingredient of the package. They wouldn't have shown up or would have fled in terror without it. Besides, they needed translation when, as most of them finally did, they made timid requests of my performers for what they called positions. When we arrived in the room, I deposited the couple in the velvet couch, where they sat primly on its edge like students in a particularly strict school. Regine and the appointed partner proceeded to the bed, and the performance began. It was my first experience as a producer, and I have to say that in the many times this ritual was performed, I never had a complaint from the audience. At the end of each performance, there was the traditional invitation to join the performers in an expensive encore, and occasionally the clients accepted. At the end of the night's work, I would often walk from Pigalle to my apartment in the first arrondissement. Paris's summer nights are brief. At the city's northerly latitude, the sun sets at 10 p.m., and at 3 in the morning, which was the hour I was usually on my way home, a mysterious interlude of milky, magical light separates darkness from dawn. Sometimes I would detour to the flower market on the bridge between the right bank and the Ile de la Cité, where fresh flowers cascaded from the span like waterfalls, to buy water lilies for my bidet, a device that went unused since Regine was insensate in her bed in Pigalle after a workaday of entertaining half a dozen clients, a dozen on the good days. I offered this account not as a defense of my conduct, nor as an apology. I'd intended to leave the matter out of the book entirely, but Arthur Laurents, the playwright and author of one of the finest libretti ever devised for a musical, the masterful foundation he laid down for Gypsy, outed me in 2000 in his autobiographical Original Story By, in which he described attending one of my exhibitions with a group that included Farley Granger. Arthur has colored the event, which featured a substitute fee because Regine was indisposed, periodic hazard de métier, with a lofty auteurs hauteur in an unfamiliar setting, but apparently the experience made a sufficient impression on him to warrant 2 pages in a book that was crowded with the major incidents of his life, and Arthur elected to name names, which is to say mine. His prerogative, but it made any reticence in these pages pointless and precious.